A human heart was found buried in a pig's carcass behind a makeshift medical clinic in Galveston, Texas. The year was 1894, and what investigators discovered next would shake the foundations of American medicine forever. The scorching Texas sun beat down on the dusty streets of Galveston in the summer of 1894. This bustling port city, known for its yellow fever outbreaks and desperate sick, had become a magnet for those seeking miracle cures. Among the legitimate doctors and snake oil salesmen walked a man who would become known as America's most dangerous unlicensed physician. Dr. Marcus Howell claimed to possess revolutionary surgical techniques that could cure any ailment. His weathered hands, he boasted, could replace failing human organs with fresh animal parts, bringing the dead back to life. What the desperate families didn't know was that Howell had never attended medical school, never passed any examination, and his only experience with anatomy came from years as a veterinarian treating livestock. The humid air of coastal Texas provided the perfect breeding ground for disease in the 1890s. Cholera, typhoid, and yellow fever swept through the immigrant communities with devastating regularity. Traditional medicine offered little hope, and families watched helplessly as their loved ones withered away. It was into this desperation that Marcus Howell stepped, carrying his leather surgical bag and promising miracles. Howell arrived in Galveston in the spring of 1894, renting a small building on the outskirts of town. He hung a simple wooden sign outside, Dr. M. Howell, specialist in advanced organ replacement. The local newspaper, desperate for content, ran a story about the mysterious new doctor who claimed he could transplant organs between species. The article, meant as sensational entertainment, instead brought a steady stream of desperate patients to his door. Mrs. Catherine O'Sullivan was among the first to seek Howell's help. Her 12-year-old son Patrick lay dying from what modern medicine would recognize as heart failure. Traditional doctors had given up hope, leaving the Irish immigrant family to prepare for the worst. When Mrs. O'Sullivan heard whispers about a doctor who could replace her son's failing heart with a strong animal organ, she gathered her life savings and made the journey to Howell's clinic. The building itself should have been a warning. What Howell called his surgical theater was nothing more than a barn he had hastily converted. Hay still stuck out from between the wooden planks, and the smell of livestock lingered in the air. A single table sat in the center, surrounded by rusted farm tools that Howell claimed were precision surgical instruments. Glass jars lined makeshift shelves filled with organs floating in murky liquid that he insisted was his special preservation solution. Young Patrick O'Sullivan became Howell's first test subject on June 15, 1894. According to witness statements later gathered by investigators, Howell administered what he called sleeping medicine, likely a dangerous mixture of laudanum and alcohol. As the boy lay unconscious, Howell began his grotesque experiment. With a butcher's knife, he opened the child's chest cavity with all the precision of someone gutting a fish. The pig's heart Howell attempted to implant came from an animal he had slaughtered that morning. With no understanding of blood types, immune responses, or even basic sterile technique, he crudely stitched the animal organ into place. The boy died within hours, his body rejecting the foreign tissue in violent convulsions. But death didn't stop Marcus Howell. Instead, it emboldened him. Word of Patrick's death spread quickly through the Irish community. But Howell convinced the grieving mother that her son had simply been too weak for the revolutionary procedure. He promised that his next patient would fare better, that he was perfecting his technique with each attempt. Amazingly, desperate families continued to arrive at his door. Sarah Martinez brought her infant daughter, born with what appeared to be severe lung complications. Howell convinced the young mother that he could replace the baby's failing lungs with those of a healthy calf. The procedure, performed without anesthesia on a screaming infant, lasted 6 horrifying hours. The child died before Howell could even complete his butchery. What do you think drove these families to trust a complete stranger with their loved ones? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by these dark chapters of medical history, hit that notification bell because we're just getting started. Throughout the summer of 1894, Howell's experiments grew increasingly bizarre. Town records, discovered decades later in the Galveston Historical Society archives, paint a picture of systematic torture disguised as medicine. Howell claimed he could cure blindness by transplanting cat eyes, restore hearing with dog ears, and strengthen weak limbs by grafting horse muscles onto human bones. The local undertaker, James Whitmer, began to notice a disturbing pattern. Bodies were arriving at his establishment with surgical incisions that made no medical sense. Organs were missing, replaced with crude stitching and what appeared to be animal parts. When Whitmer tried to discuss his concerns with the town sheriff, he was told that interference with a licensed physician's work could result in legal action. The problem was, nobody had actually verified Howell's credentials. Dr. Elizabeth Brennan, one of only 3 legitimate physicians in Galveston at the time, grew suspicious when patients stopped arriving at the city hospital. Families who would normally seek her help for serious ailments had simply vanished. When she began investigating, she discovered that many of her former patients had died under mysterious circumstances at Howell's clinic. Dr. Brennan's personal journal, preserved in the Texas Medical Association archives, reveals her growing horror as she pieced together the truth. Her entry from August 12, 1894 reads, "Visited the Howell establishment today under pretense of professional consultation. What I witnessed defies description. The man has no medical training whatsoever. His surgical instruments are farm tools, and his operating table is stained with blood that appears to be both human and animal. God help us all." The breakthrough came when Dr. Brennan convinced Sheriff Hayes to investigate a strange smell coming from behind Howell's clinic. What they found in the makeshift graveyard would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Shallow graves contained not just human remains, but a grotesque mixture of human and animal parts. Hearts, livers, kidneys, and lungs from various species were buried together in what appeared to be some twisted form of medical waste disposal. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed journal Howell kept of his experiments. Written in his own hand, the diary revealed the true scope of his delusions. He believed he was on the verge of achieving immortality through cross-species organ transplantation. Each failed experiment only convinced him that he needed to try a different animal combination. One entry, dated July 30th, 1894, reads, "Patient expired during horse kidney transplant. Rejection occurred within 2 hours. Must try sheep organs next time. The key is finding the right animal match for each human constitution.
Sheriff Hayes arrested Marcus Howell on August 20th, 1894, as he was preparing to perform what he called his masterpiece, a complete heart and lung transplant using organs from a prize bull. The patient, a local farmer's wife suffering from consumption, died on Howell's table before the sheriff could intervene. The trial of Marcus Howell became a sensation throughout Texas and beyond. Newspapers from New York to California sent reporters to cover what they called the animal doctor murder trial. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Charles Morrison, presented evidence of at least 27 deaths directly attributed to Howell's procedures. The defense strategy was as disturbing as the crimes themselves. Howell's lawyer argued that his client genuinely believed he was advancing medical science and that the deaths were unfortunate side effects of experimental treatment. They claimed that since no medical licensing laws existed in Texas at the time, Howell had committed no crime by practicing medicine without proper credentials. Dr. Brennan served as the prosecution's star witness, providing expert testimony about the impossibility of Howell's procedures. She explained to the horrified jury that cross-species organ transplantation was not just dangerous, it was scientifically impossible with the knowledge and technology of the 1890s. Each of Howell's patients had essentially been tortured to death in the name of medical progress. The most damning evidence came from Howell's own journals. Page after page detailed his growing obsession with achieving what he called biological immortality. He wrote extensively about his theory that animal organs were superior to human ones, being untainted by human weakness and moral corruption. His writings revealed a man completely detached from reality, convinced that his failures were simply stepping stones to revolutionary breakthroughs.
Swift justice. On November 3, 1894, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Marcus Howell guilty of multiple counts of murder in the first degree. Judge Harrison Webb sentenced him to death by hanging, calling his crimes an affront to human dignity and medical ethics. But Howell's story didn't end with his conviction. While awaiting execution, Howell continued to receive visitors who believed in his work. Desperate families, convinced that traditional medicine had failed them, smuggled letters and money to the condemned man. Some even begged him to share his revolutionary techniques with other doctors who might continue his research. The most disturbing visitor was Dr. Friedrich Weber, a German physician who had read about the trial in European medical journals. Weber spent hours interviewing Howell about his procedures, claiming he wanted to write a scientific paper debunking the quack's methods. What Weber actually did with that information would become another dark chapter in medical history, as similar experiments appeared in remote German clinics throughout the late 1890s. Execution. Marcus Howell was executed on January 15, 1895, at the Galveston County Jail. His final words, recorded by the attending prison chaplain, were, "My work will continue. Others will succeed where I have failed. Death is not the end. It is merely a transition to a better form." Legislative response. The immediate aftermath of Howell's execution brought sweeping changes to Texas medical law. Reform. The state legislature, horrified by the lack of oversight that had allowed such atrocities, passed the Medical Practice Act of 1895, requiring all physicians to demonstrate proper training and pass licensing examinations. Historic appointment. Dr. Elizabeth Brennan was appointed to the First Medical Board of Texas, becoming one of the first women to hold such a position in American medical regulation. Broader questions. But the story of Marcus Howell raises disturbing questions that echo through medical history to this day. How many other unlicensed practitioners were operating in remote areas of America, hidden from oversight and accountability? How many desperate families, faced with terminal diagnoses, were willing to risk everything on promises of miracle cures? Statistical horror. The Galveston Historical Society estimates that between 1890 and 1900, at least 50 similar cases of medical quackery resulted in patient deaths throughout Texas alone. Most of these cases never made it to trial, as the perpetrators simply moved to new towns when suspicions arose. The perfect conditions, the frontier mentality of the American West, combined with limited communication between distant communities, created perfect conditions for medical predators. Historical impact. Modern medical historians point to the Howell case as a turning point in American medical regulation. Expert opinion. Dr. Sarah Chen, author of Quacks and Killers, Unlicensed Medicine in 19th Century America, argues that Howell's crimes directly influenced the establishment of medical licensing boards in 12 states within 5 years of his execution. Psychological insight. Yet perhaps the most chilling aspect of this dark chapter is how easily intelligent, caring people were deceived by outrageous claims. Human vulnerability. The families that brought their loved ones to Howell weren't naive or uneducated. They were desperate. Universal truth. When faced with certain death, human beings will grasp at any hope, no matter how unlikely. Modern relevance. This psychological vulnerability continues to be exploited by medical fraudsters today. Ongoing danger. While modern regulations prevent the extreme butchery that Howell practiced, desperate patients still fall victim to unproven treatments, miracle cures, and alternative therapies that promise more than they can deliver. Memorial. The preserved remains of Howell's victims were eventually given proper burials in Galveston's Evergreen Cemetery. A small memorial, erected in 1994 on the centennial of the crimes, bears a simple inscription: "In memory of those who died seeking hope, may their suffering never be forgotten." Brennan's legacy. Dr. Brennan continued practicing medicine in Galveston until her death in 1923. Lasting trauma. Her journal entries from later years reveal ongoing nightmares about what she witnessed at Howell's clinic. Wisdom quote. She wrote, "The human capacity for both cruelty and hope never ceases to amaze me. In my years of practice, I have learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy of healing is the promise of miracle." Haunted location. The building where Howell conducted his experiments stood empty for nearly 20 years after his execution. Supernatural reports. Local residents reported strange sounds and smells emanating from the structure, leading to numerous reports of supernatural activity. Final discovery. The building was finally demolished in 1914, and according to city records, workmen discovered additional human and animal remains buried beneath the foundation. Modern day. Today, a modest office building occupies the site where Howell's clinic once stood. Forgotten horror. Few visitors to modern Galveston realize they're walking over the graves of America's first documented victims of cross-species medical experimentation. Tourism avoidance. The city's tourist boards don't include this location on their historical tours, preferring to focus on more palatable aspects of Galveston's colorful past. Legacy lesson. But the legacy of Marcus Howell serves as a stark reminder of what happens when desperation meets deception, when hope becomes a weapon wielded by those who profit from suffering. Systemic evil. His crimes weren't just individual tragedies, they were systematic exploitation of humanity's most vulnerable moments. Ethical question. The question that haunts medical ethicists to this day is simple. When traditional medicine offers no hope, how do we distinguish between legitimate experimental treatment and dangerous quackery? Where is the line between innovative medical research and criminal exploitation? Future concerns. As we advance into an era of genetic engineering, organ printing, and experimental therapies that would have seemed like science fiction to Dr. Howell's victims, these questions become more relevant than ever. Timeless desperation, the same desperation that drove families to a converted barn in 1894 Texas, still drives patients to seek unproven treatments in foreign clinics, to participate in dangerous experimental protocols, and to place their faith in practitioners who promise miracles. Core horror. The true horror of the Marcus Howell case isn't just the brutality of his methods, but it's the reminder that when faced with loss, human beings will believe almost anything, and there will always be those ready to profit from that belief. Final warning. So the next time you hear about a revolutionary medical breakthrough, a miracle cure, or a doctor who claims to achieve the impossible, remember the families that walked into that converted barn in 1894 Texas, carrying their dying loved ones and clutching their life savings. Final CTA. What do you think? Are we still vulnerable to medical predators like Marcus Howell today? Have you ever encountered questionable medical claims that seem too good to be true? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this deep dive into dark medical history has left you wanting more, subscribe to our channel for weekly explorations into the shadows of medical practice. Urgency. Hit that notification bell, because trust me, the rabbit hole of medical mysteries goes much deeper than you imagine. Final statement. Because in the end, the most terrifying medical procedures aren't the ones that fail to save lives. They're the ones that destroy lives in the name of salvation.